In this episode, I'll be showing how you can make a set of modular dungeon tiles that packs away inside a small box. Hello and welcome back. Now, I have made something like this in a previous video, but in that one, the dungeon inside the box was designed around a little mini adventure that I'd written, and as such, it wasn't something that was very reusable. This time though, I thought I'd have a go at making something that's fairly generic, something that can be used to make anything from, say, a small dungeon tomb, to the inside of a little townhouse, for example. Something that's pretty versatile. So yeah, that's the idea behind this one, and as usual, you can find a link to the PDF file down in the description. So let's get started. Okay then, the first thing we're going to do is make the box itself, and for this, we'll take the texture for the bottom of the box, which I've just trimmed roughly to size, and we'll glue that to some thick card. The stuff I'm using for this is 1mm thick grey board, or chipboard I think it's sometimes called. I'll put a link in the description so you can get a better idea of what I'm talking about. And to glue it down, I'm just using a good old-fashioned glue stick. Then, when that's dry, we can cut it to size, like I've done here. Next, we'll need to flip that over, and we're then going to take a piece of corrugated cardboard, and that needs to be cut so that it's 2 inches wide by the same length as one of the shorter sides of the box, which should be around 7 inches. And I say around 7 inches as certain printers might print things a tiny bit bigger or smaller than that, or the paper might have expanded ever so slightly when you applied the glue to it, so it's best to measure it yourself, just to make sure it's accurate. Anyway, what I like to do, because I haven't always got a very steady hand, is lie that piece down on top of the card, leaving a slight gap that's about the width of the corrugated piece itself. Then I can run a thin line of hot glue along that gap, so that I can then kind of fold the cardboard back up and line it up with the edge of the card underneath, as you can hopefully see. And if you like, you can also add some more hot glue along the inside, just to add a bit more strength. Then it's a simple matter of doing the same thing again to the opposite side. So I'll go ahead and do just that. And when we're done, that should end up looking something like this. Okay, next we'll need to measure the distance between the two end pieces, and this is going to vary depending on the thickness of the cardboard that you're using. And we'll cut out another piece of the same corrugated card, but this time it's as long as the measurement that we just made. Then, as you might have guessed, we're going to glue the other two sides of the box into place, in much the same fashion. And once the walls are in place, we'll also need to glue the corners together, which is what you can see me doing in this part of the video here. Okay then, so after I've added some extra glue to all of the corners for additional strength, we now have the makings of a little box. And if I flip that over, so you can see the floor tiles, our next job is going to be to cover each of the 4 sides. So for this, we're going to be using the large 2-inch tall wall textures. And the only thing you really need to keep in mind when gluing these into place is that the large brick with the shadow along the bottom, that faces towards the open end of the box. But yeah, there's not much more to say about this part, as you can see pretty clearly what I'm doing, so I'll just leave the video running while I cover all 4 sides. So there's the last one being glued into place now, and here's how it looks when we're done. there's our little box, with floor tiles glued to the top and brickwork glued to the sides. Then, to make the lid, it's the same thing all over again, but this time we'll need to use the smaller 1-inch high walls and the larger lid floor texture, because, you know, it needs to be a bit bigger so that it fits over the bottom half of the box, like so. With that, the box is done, and as you'll see in a second, the idea here is that the box itself can also serve as a couple of raised areas within the dungeon, perhaps even one large room, split over 2 levels, like I'm showing here. But yeah, now that the box is done, we can now move on to the tiles that go inside. Okay then, for these we'll be using some single corrugated card again, but this time we'll be doing the opposite, and gluing the floor textures to the top. It's also worth mentioning that, if you can, this actually works better if you can glue the textures on at a 45-degree angle to the corrugation itself. That way, when the tiles cut to size, you end up with stronger edges all the way around, as you can hopefully see here. Anyway, next we'll take some more of the 1mm thick card, and we're going to glue one of the short wall pages on top of that. And it is important that you use the darker of the 2 versions, the ones labelled interior walls. Then, not surprisingly, we'll cut those to size with a sharp knife and a metal ruler. Though for this next part, it does help if you tape some grease-proof paper to the desk, parchment or baking paper it's sometimes called, like so. Otherwise, you run the risk of accidentally gluing the tile to the table in this next part. So here's the tile that we just made, and all we're going to do here is measure out a section of the wall that's the same size as one of the edges, like you can see me doing here on the screen, cut it to size with a sharp knife and a metal ruler, and we're then going to hot glue that to the same edge of the tile, with the darker edge facing downwards towards the table, which is, again, what you can see me doing here in this part of the video. And with any luck, that should end up looking something like this, a short wall running around the edge of the tile. We can then repeat the process around all of the other edges, as you're about to see in this time lapse. Okay, so here's how it looks at this stage, though I do just want to pause here for a second and say that when I was measuring this short piece here at the top of the screen, I also took into account the extra thickness of the walls on either side, if that makes sense. Anyway, back to the time lapse. So there you go, here's this passage section with all of the inside walls added. But obviously, we're also going to need to add a similar texture to the outside, and that's where the second page of short walls comes in, the ones labelled exterior walls, surprisingly, which we'll just cut to size. And all we're going to do with these is glue them around the outside in much the same way as we did with the outside of the box, with the only real difference being that some of these tiles have internal corners, so it helps if you have something with a straight edge to help push the paper into those corners. But other than that, it's pretty much the same thing, just on a smaller scale. Okay, now that's done, here it is with the brick texture on either side of the wall. And the paper wrapped around the outside, that also helps to keep the corners in place as well. Then it's just a matter of doing the same thing for the rest of the passage tiles, and the room tiles as well. We're essentially just adding a very thin 2.5D wall around all of the edges, walls where we can add some clip-on doorways to join them together. And speaking of doorways, that's what we're going to have a go at making next. Right then, to make these doorways, we'll first need to glue the back and the front to more of that 1mm thick cardboard. And if you have some, the blank spacer piece, that needs to be glued to some card that's 2mm thick. Alternatively, you can just glue 2 of the 1mm pieces back to back. Then we can simply cut all of those to size. There you go. Next, we'll take the glue gun, apply a generous amount of hot glue to one side of the spacer piece, and then stick one side of the door on top so that both the sides and the top of the door are flush with 3 of the edges. We'll then do the same thing again by adding more glue to the back of the spacer piece and gluing the other side of the door into place as well. That should then result in this kind of thing that you can see here. Basically, a door with a small gap at the bottom, which can then be used to slide over the top of 2 adjacent walls to hold a couple of tiles together. If you've seen any of Wylock's videos, then they're pretty much the same thing as his clip-on wall features. But if by any chance you're not familiar with Wylock stuff, then I'll put a card in the corner of the screen, though I imagine most of you will know who I'm talking about. But yeah, as well as the wooden doors, I've also included a portcullis for a bit of added variety. There's the secret door version, as I think that will be pretty useful as well. Plus, there's also an empty archway, which can be used to represent an open door if you like, but more importantly, they're a nice way of joining 2 passage tiles together, like you can see me doing here. And if I quickly add a room, attach one of the doors, and see if I can tilt the whole thing towards the camera, you can see how these clip-on doorways work. I mean, they obviously mark the location of doors and the like, but they also really do help to keep all the dungeon tiles fixed together. Okay, next we're going to make some steps, and for these we'll first need to glue the sides to some corrugated card or similar, the thicker the better for this piece, and the treads and risers, they can be glued to some thin cereal box card. Then we can cut those to size. So for this one there's 2 sides, 3 risers and 3 treads. Next we can take the glue gun again and start gluing it all together. And I think the best way to do this is to first glue one of the risers into place, again making sure that the darker edge is facing downwards towards the bottom of the steps. So that's what I'm doing here, starting with the middle one and making sure that it's flush with both side pieces. Basically, we're aiming for this kind of thing. It's pretty straightforward. Then we can do the same thing for the other 2 risers, like you can see me doing here. So there you go, something like this. And once we've done that, it's then just a matter of gluing the treads into place. So I'll go ahead and do that now. Oh, and I'll also position them so that the darker edge is glued towards the back. And there you have it. Here's the completed steps. And as you'll see in a second, these can be used as a set of stairs leading up to a raised section of the dungeon, either from a room like you can see here, or if you prefer, they should also fit inside a passage tile, maybe to represent a stairway leading in or out of the dungeon. But yeah, as well as these, there's also some smaller stairs that are just 2 steps high, which are made in the exact same way, and there's 3 of those. However, if you like, as an optional extra, we can take this texture, glue that to more of the 2mm thick card, and then cut it to size, like so. Then we'll cut out this texture, apply plenty of glue to the back, and then stick that to the other side of the card, making sure that both of the darker edges are at the bottom again. So that we end up with this kind of thing that you can see here. If we then take the glue gun and apply some glue to the back of one of these smaller steps, we can glue the cardboard piece into place with the blank white section hidden inside the stairs, and if you like, you can also add some more glue to the inside to add a bit more strength, so that when the glue dries, we end up with a piece that looks like this. And the idea here is that if I just quickly place that inside a passage tile and slot a doorway over the top of that extra piece we just added, now we have something that looks like steps leading up to a doorway, which again, maybe it leads in or out of the dungeon, or perhaps it just leads up to a slightly higher level, like I'm showing here with the lid of the box. Either way, it's up to you if you want to include it or not. Anyway, when I was laying out the PDF, I did end up with some extra space to fill on a few of the pages, so I've decided to include a few bonus tile overlays. And to make these, you'll simply need to glue the texture to some thick card. As you can see, I'm using the 1mm thick card again, and then cut them to size when the glue's dried, like I've done here. And like I say, these are just extra pieces that can be placed on top of the tiles to add some additional details, like maybe you want a passage with a stairway leading down, or perhaps there's a pit trap in the middle of one of the rooms. They're just useful things to have. So, now that they're done, that's about it for the crafting part of this video, though I am going to include this segment here where I'm packing everything away inside the box, as it does have to be done in a certain order if you want everything to fit. And while I'm doing that, I'll fill the dead air by saying that if you're interested in supporting the channel and everything I'm doing here, then you can either pay a small amount for the PDF files. They'll always be available as pay what you want downloads, so there's no pressure to pay anything unless you really want to. Alternatively, there's also my Patreon page, or the option to become a YouTube member, if that's more your kind of thing. So, if you do want to do something like that, then just choose whichever option is best for you. Just choose one. There's no need to do more than that. But, like I say, there's no pressure to do any of these things. You'll always be able to download the PDFs for free, though I would ask if you could take the time to give the video a like, or leave a comment or something like that, assuming you're actually enjoying the content, that is. Anyway, now it's all packed away, I'll leave you with a picture of it in action, and as you're about to see, you can also add in some extra scatter terrain, perhaps combining it with some of the ideas from my Travel GM's kit video, and make yourself a pretty versatile terrain set that doesn't take up much space at all. And I think that's it for this one. I do hope you enjoyed it, and I would be interested to know if anyone is going to have a go at making one themselves, or, if you might have done anything differently. But, yeah. Thanks for watching.